Something happened to Savannah Guthrie that absolutely nobody saw coming. And when the news broke, it didn't just ripple through the entertainment world. It hit millions of people directly in the chest. Fans who had spent years waking up to her voice, her smile, her calm in the very middle of the storm, suddenly found themselves asking the same desperate question: is she okay? Because here's the thing about Savannah Guthrie. She is not just a television host. She is not just a face on a screen. She is the woman who showed up to work after personal heartbreak. She is the woman who stood live on national television while the world was falling apart, and somehow, made you feel like things were going to be okay. She became, for millions of people, a constant, a warm and familiar presence in the most uncertain of mornings. So when devastating news about her surfaced, when the details finally started coming out, the reaction wasn't just sympathy. It was something deeper, something far more personal, because losing a constant, even temporarily, even just in the way you knew them, shakes something inside you that you never expected to feel. What exactly happened? What is Savannah going through right now? And what does this mean for the woman, the career, and the story that so many people thought they already knew? Stay with us, because the full picture is far more emotional, far more human, and far more inspiring than any headline could ever begin to capture. To truly understand why this news hit so hard, you first have to understand who Savannah Guthrie really is. Not the polished television version the world sees every morning, but the real, layered, extraordinary woman living underneath those studio lights. Savannah Lee Guthrie was born on December 27, 1971, in Melbourne, Australia, where her father was working at the time. She grew up in Tucson, Arizona, inside a household that quietly valued hard work, education, and a steady, unshakable kind of perseverance. From the outside, her childhood looked ordinary, but inside that ordinary life, she was building something that was anything but a mind sharper than most, a curiosity that never once switched off, and an emotional intelligence that would eventually make her one of the most trusted faces in all of American journalism. She never took the easy road. She could have. Savannah Guthrie was, by every possible measure, someone with options. But she chose law first, graduating magna cum laude from the University of Arizona, then earning her law degree from Georgetown University Law Center. She passed the bar. She was a practicing attorney, sharp and credentialed and capable. And then, almost without warning, she made a pivot that surprised nearly everyone who knew her. She walked away from law and walked, eyes wide open, toward journalism. That decision wasn't made from comfort or certainty. It was made from a feeling, a deep, undeniable pull toward storytelling, toward the truth, toward the kind of work that placed her at the center of the moments that actually mattered. She started at a local Arizona station. She worked hard, paid her dues in the way that so many people who eventually reached the top do, quietly, steadily, without fanfare or applause. By the time she landed at NBC News as a correspondent, it was already clear that something genuinely special was unfolding. And when she stepped into the co-anchor chair on Today in 2012 alongside Matt Lauer, it felt, to millions of viewers, like a natural and inevitable rival. Like she had always been there. Like she had always unmistakably belonged. But what viewers saw on that screen, the confidence, the ease, the effortless warmth, had been built on years of struggle they never once witnessed. Years of quiet doubt, years of grinding, years of being told, in one way or another, that the path she was choosing was harder than it needed to be. That is the woman at the center of this story. That is the Savannah Guthrie whose life, in recent times, has taken a turn that no one expected, and that has left her fans, her colleagues, and all those who admire her deeply in a state of stunned, heavy-hearted concern. The very first sign that something was different came not from a press release or a breaking news alert. It came, quietly and unmistakably, from the screen itself. Viewers noticed it before the media ever did. It's always that way with public figures that people genuinely, deeply care about. The audience catches the tiny shifts before anyone finds the words to name them. A slight change in energy, a moment of hesitation that simply wasn't there before. Something living behind the eyes that looked heavier than usual. Quieter than the Savannah they had watched and trusted for years, people started talking. Social media threads filled with questions. Fans who watched Today every single morning began carefully comparing notes, with the kind of quiet urgency that only ever comes from genuine concern. Not gossip, not spectacle. Real, human worry about a real, human person. And then, slowly, unmistakably, the details began to emerge. What Savannah had been quietly managing behind the scenes was something that many people face, yet very few people in her position ever speak about openly. The unrelenting pressure of being a constant presence in an industry that demands perfection. The accumulated weight of personal challenges layered on top of professional ones. And beneath it all, a health situation that had been developing slowly, silently, and that would ultimately force her to confront something she had been pushing through for far longer than anyone around her realized. For Savannah, the very idea of slowing down had never once been part of her vocabulary. She was the kind of person who showed up, who delivered, who accepted the hard assignments and the long days and the emotionally draining interviews without complaint, because that's who she was. That's who she had always been. But the body, as it always does, found a way to demand what the mind had long refused to ask for. Those who have worked closely alongside Savannah Guthrie will tell you the same thing. Without hesitation and without prompting, she is, at her core, a professional in the truest and most complete sense of the word. Not the cold, mechanical kind of professional who performs flawlessly and then retreats into distance. The warm, present, fully committed kind who brings her entire self, heart and mind and soul, to every single moment she inhabits. That is precisely what made this situation so profoundly difficult to witness. Because watching someone who gives absolutely everything, watching them face something they simply cannot push through with sheer force of will, is a particular and very specific kind of heartbreak. It was back in 2016 that Savannah first revealed something that genuinely shook her devoted audience. She had lost nearly all the vision in her right eye after being accidentally struck by one of her children's toys. The injury arrived suddenly, without warning. The road to recovery was deeply uncertain, and yet she continued to show up, continued to anchor, continued to deliver with the kind of quiet, unassuming courage that most people, if we're being honest, simply do not have. That single moment told you everything essential about her character, and it also planted a lasting seed of concern deep in the minds of fans who, for the very first time, were powerfully reminded that Savannah Guthrie, despite everything she so beautifully projected, was human, vulnerable, just as subject to the same sudden, devastating turns that life delivers to all of us without warning or apology. So when news began circulating once again about her well-being, it landed differently this time. It landed carrying the full weight of that earlier moment still lingering in the room, and with the quiet, collective understanding that for Savannah, the challenges had never truly stopped there. What many fans never fully knew, what had never been woven together into one complete, connected story, was just how much Savannah Guthrie had quietly navigated in her personal life at the very same time she was becoming one of the most visible and admired women in all of American television. Her first marriage ended in divorce. She moved through that chapter quietly, professionally, without ever making it a public event or a vehicle for sympathy. Then she found love again with political consultant Michael Feldman and built a life that, from the outside, looked like everything she had ever worked toward. A marriage grounded in genuine mutual respect. 2 children she has described in rare and precious moments of personal openness as the great, irreplaceable joys of her entire life. But here's the part of the story that never makes the highlight reel, the part that lives quietly in the space between the morning broadcasts and the evening routines, the part that no camera ever captures and no segment ever covers. Raising 2 young children while anchoring one of the most watched morning programs in the country is not a balancing act. It is a constant, exhausting, deeply personal negotiation between 2 worlds that both demand everything you have, every single day. Savannah has spoken, carefully and honestly, about how difficult and relentless that negotiation can truly be, about the guilt that settles in when you're a working mother operating at the absolute highest level, about those quiet moments when neither world feels like it's receiving nearly enough of you. Those admissions, rare as they were and precious, because of it, connected her to millions of women who watched her every single morning and felt, perhaps for the very first time, that someone in her extraordinary position truly, genuinely understood what their everyday lives actually felt like. There's a particular kind of strength that women like Savannah Guthrie carry through their lives, one that is rarely celebrated in the way it truly deserves to be. It's not the loud, visible, banner-waving kind of strength that earns standing ovations. It's the kind that shows up quietly at 5 in the morning after a sleepless night, the kind that smiles warmly through grief, the kind that asks hard, unflinching questions of the most powerful people in the world while privately carrying its own deeply unanswered questions all the way back home. Savannah has that strength in abundance. Anyone who has watched her for any sustained period of time has felt it radiating through the screen. But strength, sustained without rest, without genuine acknowledgement, without ever being given the simple space to be fully human, carries a cost that eventually must be paid. The news that has emerged recently about Savannah touches on that cost in a way that is simply impossible to ignore any longer. After years of being the anchor, both literally and figuratively, for a nation that needed steadying, she has been confronted with a reality that no amount of preparation, professionalism, or iron-willed perseverance could entirely soften or shield her from. Her vision challenges, which began with that shattering 2016 injury, continued quietly evolving in ways that created ongoing, deeply personal uncertainty. The question of what her future on screen would look like, and more intimately, what her daily lived life would feel like, became one that she and her family had to sit with, to carry in ways that most of her viewers never once knew about. And yet through all of it, she kept showing up, kept delivering, kept being the Savannah that millions of people counted on, even as she was privately confronting questions that had no easy answers and no roadmap to guide her forward. That is not a small thing. That is an enormous, humbling, and deeply moving thing. And it deserves, finally, to be named. There's a version of Savannah Guthrie's story that gets told with great frequency. The version featuring the degrees, the career pivots, the gleaming anchor desk, and the high-profile interviews that shaped the national conversation. It's a genuinely good story, an impressively constructed story. But it is not even close, the whole story. The whole story includes the moments of private doubt that nobody ever films. The late-night inner conversations about whether she was doing enough, being enough, giving enough to the people and the work and the life that mattered most deeply to her. The whole story includes the very real physical toll of a career that has no true off switch, where your face, your voice, and your composure are all expected to perform at their absolute highest level every single morning, regardless of what happened the night before, or the week before, or the year before that. Savannah Guthrie has sat directly across from presidents. She has anchored election nights that stretched through until dawn. She has conducted interviews that became lasting, defining parts of the national conversation in ways that very few journalists in any generation ever achieve. And she has done all of this while simultaneously being a wife, a devoted mother, a loyal friend, while sincerely trying to honor every vital part of her life with the same level of commitment and authentic care. But what we are now learning, in the clear-eyed wake of this latest news, is that even the most capable, most dedicated, most seemingly unshakable among us carry a limit. Not a weakness, a limit. There is a meaningful and important difference between those two things, and it matters enormously. Savannah reaching that limit, in whatever specific form it has ultimately taken, is not in any way a failure of character. It is, instead, the truest and most human evidence of everything she has carried and everything she has quietly endured. The reaction from fans when this news finally broke was immediate, overwhelming, and profoundly moving, and it said something deep and revealing about the unique relationship between this remarkable woman and the millions of people who have watched her faithfully over the years. Social media filled not with shallow shock for its own sake, but with a genuine, spontaneous outpouring of authentic human warmth. Messages poured in from people who had watched Savannah anchor through the worst, most frightening days of the last decade, through national tragedies, through political upheaval that tested everyone's sense of stability, through a global pandemic that rewrote every single person's understanding of normal, who now wanted, in whatever small digital way they possibly could, to give something meaningful back. She was there for us, one deeply moved viewer wrote simply. Now we're here for her. That sentence, those 8 small words, captures something profoundly and undeniably real. Because morning television, at its very best, is not mere entertainment. It is companionship. It is the trusted, familiar voice in the kitchen while you make your first cup of coffee. The steady face on the screen that tells you, without ever saying so directly, that the world is still turning and the new day ahead is still genuinely worth showing up for. Savannah Guthrie has been that voice and that face for millions upon millions of people for more than a decade. So when she becomes the one who needs steadying, when the anchor herself needs an anchor, it creates a moment that transcends ordinary celebrity concern entirely. It becomes something far more personal than that, something more mutual, something more honestly, beautifully human. The fact that fans responded precisely the way they did is not surprising to a single soul who truly understands what Savannah has given to the people who watch her. It is simply, powerfully, movingly, the reflection coming back. What happens next for Savannah Guthrie is a question that a great many people are quietly holding right now, some with genuine anxiety, some with steady hope, and many, many more with both of those feelings living side by side, inseparable and real. The answer, as far as it can honestly and responsibly be known, is this: Savannah Guthrie is not a person who gives up. She is simply not built that way. Everything etched into her remarkable history, the bold career changes, the quiet personal challenges, the sudden physical setbacks, the relentless public and private pressure she has navigated with such consistent and remarkable grace, points unmistakably towards someone who always finds a way forward. Not always the way she originally planned, not always in the direction the world expected or demanded, but forward without question and with purpose. There is something deeply and quietly meaningful about the fact that, even while managing her own very real challenges, Savannah Guthrie has continued using her powerful platform to tell the stories that matter most, to ask the difficult, necessary questions that hold power genuinely accountable, to show up day after day with the kind of journalistic integrity that has always defined her work at its finest, regardless of what she was personally navigating entirely out of the camera's sight. That enduring commitment tells you who she truly is at her most fundamental core. Not the image, not the carefully constructed brand, the actual, breathing, feeling person, the one who originally chose this demanding work because she believed with her whole heart that it mattered, and who has never, not for a single moment, stopped believing that, even on the days when belief itself was the single hardest thing to hold on to. Her colleagues at NBC, by all available accounts, have rallied around her with the kind of genuine, unperformed solidarity that does not always exist naturally within high-pressure television environments, because Savannah is, by every account from every person who has actually worked alongside her, every bit as warm and real and present in private as she has always appeared on screen. What you see is, remarkably and beautifully, exactly what you get. There is a lesson embedded quietly within Savannah Guthrie's story, one that extends far beyond her specific career, her particular industry, or the unique details of her circumstances. It is a lesson about what it genuinely means to be fully, unapologetically human in a world that ceaselessly asks you to perform something more controlled, more polished, more bulletproof than humanity ever actually allows any of us to be. Savannah has spent her entire remarkable career helping people understand the world around them, helping them make sense of events that are confusing, painful, frightening, or simply too overwhelming to process alone. She has sat in that anchor chair during moments of profound national grief and gently helped an entire country work through what it was collectively feeling. She has done all of this with genuine empathy, unwavering professionalism, and a steady, quiet compassion that is, by any honest measure, genuinely rare. And now, as she faces her own deeply personal moment of real difficulty, her own chapter that asks others to provide the steadiness she has so generously offered the world. She is, perhaps entirely without intending to, teaching one final and essential thing: that asking for support is not weakness, that being openly seen in a difficult, vulnerable moment is not failure, that the very same compassion she has so freely extended outward to the world is allowed, is more than allowed, is deeply deserved, to find its way back to her, if only she permits herself to receive it.